Hello, everybody, and welcome to Film Family. And today we'll be reviewing Pulp Fiction, and we're reviewing this in anticipation for Quentin Tarantino's newest movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that comes out in around 3 weeks now.
Yeah.
And so we thought we should talk about one of his biggest movies, arguably his most successful movie and acclaimed movie. And so this is, in my opinion, one of the greatest movies ever made. And in terms of its importance to movies, in terms of indie movies, in terms of just launching, a new era of Hollywood, this is a very important movie.
Totally agree, and I think that this introduced the world. Even though there was, Reservoir Dogs, and he wrote True Romance, and this was Quentin being Quentin, and in terms of being a director and kind of telling us his voice, kind of his style, which was something unique and different to other styles out there. And I really, really loved this movie. And I was totally in the indie phase at that point, independent phase. And so this movie sung to me, like it really did.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this movie when I was younger, and rewatching it recently, I just realized that it takes a kind of unrealistic amount of skill to make a movie this good, because this movie is essentially about nothing. And this movie, for me, really, the only thing you could kind of pull out of it is the most basic of storytelling. It's about, some people trying to do some things, and then some other people trying to do some things, and sometimes they end up running into each other. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much the way you could sum this movie up. It's very basic, but, it's just beautifully done. It's so well written, it's so well directed, and it's just such a good movie. And, I mean, the acting in this movie is really good. My favorite performance, it's probably Samuel L. Jackson, but I also really like Bruce Willis in this movie. I mean, I like everybody in this movie, but there's also a movie for me that has sort of a kind of a theme of randomness, because things a lot of the time just happen in this movie that are really just random. Vincent dies because he's at, the apartment when Butch gets there, and he just randomly dies because sometimes you just die. Yeah. And the Pop-Tart shot. And then, when Butch tries to hit Marcellus, he just, he crashes, and they end up, in the shop, in the whole dungeon. Some things just happen. So, I think there's a message in this movie about the randomness of the world, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to go off and continue with the acting and the just amount of characters, but great actors in there and actresses. It's some people had cameos or whatever you want to call it, but there's no small parts in there. Everything was important.
Yeah.
Where there's Eric Stokes to even Quentin doing his own
Jimmy.
thing. Yeah. It's they all served a purpose, or Harvey Keitel. It's they all were important in their own way, and they all stole their scene when they came in.
I think the biggest small cameo in this movie is Christopher Walken as the general, because I think that watch really is a center point of this movie, or centerpiece of this movie, because I mean it's just a watch, but as his speech shows, it means a lot more than that, and it's such an essential part of Butch's character, and it really dictates a big part of this movie. I mean, Vincent dies because of that watch.
He had to go back because of how important the watch was.
Butch ends up being safe because of that watch, because Marcellus lets him go, and there's just a lot of, I think, interesting things that come from just a small piece of, it's just a watch. So, yeah.
I want to talk about Samuel Jackson, because I think he was 45, 46 when he did this movie. And because we looked it up. We had to look it up. I think everyone else was kind of in their, I want to say 40 or 39-ish time, from Travolta to Willis. But he was just so amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, he really was. And I went back and watched it thinking, okay, was he as good as I remembered? And he was actually better than I remembered in there. And so, and he's, to me, he's the man. He's the man anyway. Well, but I was just this movie made him a star.
Yeah, I think he's the most interesting character in this movie. In a movie with so many people who are kind of straightforward, or who just kind of want one thing, whether it be money or fame, or Butch kind of just wants peace and money. And I think Samuel Jackson's looking for something a little more divine, or a little more existential with his whole speeches about God. And I really like the ending of this movie when he kind of sends Tim Roth and his wife. I can't remember the names, but he sends them on their way because of his revelation and how the bullets never hit them. And I really do think him and John Travolta, who plays Vincent, I think their relationship and their chemistry is just it's incredible. I mean, the fact they talk about such normal things that everyday people talk about, and just the fact that they know each other well enough to kind of know each other's what gets each other mad and what each other are interested in, and it seems like a genuine friendship that they build in the movie, and it's really fun to watch. And I like too, like I was saying, how Vincent is so kind of like anti-religious or almost like dismissive of what Jules has to say about God and religion, and that's something that's really kind of fascinating to watch. Just two people kind of talk about those types of issues.
And I've always said that about characters. If you write strong enough characters, you'll watch them anywhere, or watch them talk about anything, which is really, they're talking about Royale with cheese, McDonald's, but it somehow incorporates into the storyline. And I just think it really is brilliant writing. Did he won an Academy Award?
Yeah, Best Original Screenplay.
And I think it was him and
Roger Avery.
Yeah. So for me, I think it was well deserved. I became a Quentin fan because of that, and I actually went back. I watched him out of order. I went back and watched Reservoir Dogs, and then True Romance, even though it wasn't directed by him. But and then from then on, I've been a fan. So I'm eager to see what he does next.
Yeah, Quentin Tarantino really did kind of cement his place in Hollywood in this movie. A lot of people still campaign that this movie should have won Best Picture. It came out in '94, which is one of the premier film years out there. A lot of people say Shawshank, but it's whatever your preference is. But
what ended up winning?
Forrest Gump. But
I'd love Forrest Gump, but over Shawshank and Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, but
that's another.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most I would say like truly American movies, and I think that's something that I couldn't really articulate very well in terms of I can't really explain why I think this movie is a great American movie and not just a great movie, but I think there's something to be said about some of the dialogue scenes and some of the subject matter of those scenes that for me kind of makes it feel a little more American than your average movie.
Yeah.
And Quentin Tarantino, he's a big fan of just culture in general, American culture. There's dance scenes in this movie. There's, discussions about pop culture, and Quentin Tarantino makes that the most interesting. But I'll ask you, what's your favorite storyline in this movie?
Gosh, that's a hard one, because for me, I was drawn to, I was going to say, Jules's whole arc of divine intervention and how he went from this ruthless killer to now trying to find a higher purpose, and he's on his path of no, there's a reason why those bullets missed, and whatever. But I mean, they're all good in that way. There's not an argument for it.
I love when he says he's I'm just gonna go around the world till God finds a place for me. He's like, you're gonna be a bum. He's like, no, I'm gonna be a servant. And there's a whole argument. That was one of my favorite pieces of dialogue. And then the whole diner. And I think even though I had already seen this movie, I didn't really think it was a big deal. But I just realized how kind of smart it was to have the movie's first scene be from that diner, and then have the movie end with that diner. Yeah. I think that was a really clever touch. And a lot of movies, will do that nowadays, that they start at the end or whatever. And I feel like a lot of them were heavily inspired by this movie. And then one other thing I want to talk about this movie is that the shots in this movie are actually very long. There's not a lot of cuts in this movie. There's so many scenes that track people from one location to the next, and there's full dialogue on display. I don't know how many pages worth in the script, but it seems like at least one or two a lot of the time, and it really makes you think, because that's not easy as an actor to recite all that off the top of your head, especially with the cadence and the delivery that your director wants. So that was something that impressed me upon rewatch, because I didn't really notice that when I first watched this movie. And that was one of the things I really like about this movie too. These long takes that never feel interrupted, so they make it feel a little more authentic, because the actor never has to kind of artificially recreate their lines or anything. They're doing it all at once, and if they mess it up, then they're going to do it again. So the shots you're seeing are kind of the best versions that they could possibly do.
Yeah, exactly, and that comes down to the directing as well, the staging of where they are and all that stuff. It felt like in a good way, like a play, in a way where they would come into shots sometimes, and then they would go back out of the shots. Like there's that one scene where he's like, "What time is it?" And he's like, "We're early. Let's hang back."
Yeah.
And then they go back and
Exactly.
they continue their talking, but
Full
the
shot.
camera doesn't follow them. It stays back, and I thought that was really clever, and it's interesting watching it now with like those kind of eyes and seeing how these are choices that directors make, and so I like that as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think that besides that in this movie, I think that the whole idea of the stories also being connected, even though that is something that had been done before, I feel that it had never been done as, I guess I would say the word intelligent or as clever as this movie executes it, especially with the fact that, some characters end up meeting each other that weren't actually expected to. Mm-hmm. I feel like people, when watching this movie, were thinking to themselves, oh, they're connected, the stories, but they're still separate from one another. They're all in just kind of the same world. But when you see Vincent get killed by Butch, or when you see the diner robbery be involved with Jules and Vincent, then it's like, oh, okay, it's not just, disconnected stories. They actually have some sort of, connection to each other. And that was something that was very interesting to watch.
Yeah, especially because you don't really even know what's going to happen next. That was the thing when you're watching it for the first time. It's like, where are they going to go? Especially when Vincent dies, you're like, that takes you for a loop. You're like, wow, I was just getting to know this character.
And there's no dramatic, there's nothing behind it. It's really just a kind of death.
Simple.
Yeah, they never really emphasize it.
Yeah.
It just shows that he dies, and then it kind of lets you know that that's what happened, and skips past it.
Yeah.
That's something I think that is kind of a brave choice, because it doesn't always happen. You want to give characters very drawn out deaths. But yeah, overall, I just say that this is a movie that it never tries to be anything besides itself, and I do like that with movies. It knows its own identity. It knows it's a movie that is essentially about nothing. It knows that it takes that nothing premise and like makes it into just so much more. It's so entertaining to watch. Like we said, the acting is all great. We didn't even talk about Uma Thurman or Ving Rhames or just some of the other fantastic people in this movie. There's so many great cast members. But I just think that if you haven't seen this movie, you really do have to. Plus, the use of songs in this movie and the soundtrack is very good. Quentin Tarantino never really did a score till like The Hateful Eight. So I that's something I always liked about him, is how he uses these kind of classic songs, whether it be rock or whatever, just American kind of music, and he always likes to infuse that into a story somehow. And this movie really is just, I think, something special. And if you haven't seen it, you should probably do that.
Yeah, right away. So, do we dare rate it?
Yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 for me.
Okay, I was gonna say,
I can't give this movie anything less than that.
This would be my first 10 that I've given out here.
Yeah.
Won't be my last, but yeah, it's a for what it is, it's a perfect movie for its genre in that way. Like, I wouldn't change one thing about it, because each thing needs the other to kind of make the movie good.
It's very meticulously crafted too. It's not like a movie that just has random things happening, even though it does appear that way. I think Quentin always knew exactly where he wanted things placed and why he took certain parts of the story and chunked it out into other parts, or it kept a whole story and a whole segment. So yeah, go ahead and see this movie, and let us know what you think about it. Let us know what you think is in the briefcase.
Oh yeah, the briefcase, the famous briefcase.
Still being debated over today. Yeah. But yeah, and thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Adios.